Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Finance Ways and Means Committee to order for the afternoon of February 20, the afternoon of March 5th, 2024. Before we begin, do we have any personal orders or announcements? Seeing none. We do have I'm sorry, Representative Sparks.
Just want to recognize our road builders here. Y'all give it up for our road builders.
And I had some road builders from my area here earlier, but I don't see them now. But we welcome all of you, as well as I know many of us saw our doctors that were here on the Hill today as well. So we welcome them to the Capitol. We do have a short calendar today. I'm sorry, Mr. Clerk, I skipped right over you. Please call the roll.
Representatives Barrett, Boyd, Camper, Cochran, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Hawk, Hicks of Hawkins, Hicks of Washington, Kiesling, Lambert, Love, Lynn, McKenzie, Miller, Moon, Parkinson, Shaw, Sparks, Whitson, Williams, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Thank you for keeping us in order here. But we do have a short calendar. We have budget presentations after that. But for the members who have bills, we're going to go ahead and get those out of the way. The first item on our calendar is House Bill 2205. That's by Representative Barrett. We have a motion of second. Representative Barrett, you're recognized at your seat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Later. Members, House Bill 2205 comes from the District Attorney's Count Conference. Under current law, district attorneys are required to prosecute criminal cases in municipal courts that have concurrent general sessions criminal jurisdiction, where the municipality provides sufficient personnel to the district attorney for that purpose. A majority of municipalities across the state have concurrent general sessions criminal jurisdiction. Those that do have already mutually acceptable agreements with their district attorneys to provide sufficient prosecutorial personnel in those courts. However, as a result of recent questions, issues, and disputes that have arisen regarding the responsibilities of a municipality to provide these resources, it is necessary to clarify and specifically define the meaning of sufficient prosecutorial personnel. This bill provides and clarifies that the district attorney shall only prosecute cases in municipal courts where the municipality provides sufficient additional prosecutorial personnel, which must include at least one assistant district attorney position funded at any entry-level compensation. This is consistent with current law that also requires at least one assistant district attorney position be provided for each new trial court judge position that is created within a judicial district. Legislation is critical to the fair and effective administration of justice due to the fact that, on average, a prosecutor handles over 1,700 cases a year. Therefore, the addition of municipalities with criminal jurisdiction increases the caseload burden on a district attorney general's office and requires additional prosecutorial resources. With that, Madam Chair, Lady, I stand ready for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor, for that very thorough explanation. Are there questions of the sponsor? Seeing none, we're voting on House Bill. I'm sorry, Leader Camper, I did not see your hand.
I know, I can tell. It's all right, so good. Sponsor, the cost for this will be burdened by which entity? Who would bear the cost of this?
Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Leader, for the question. The cost for this will be on the municipality, and that's part of the issue is that municipalities that have decided to have concurrent general sessions jurisdiction, there are a handful of municipalities that are not carrying their load, and they're requiring the district attorneys to provide an assistant DA to work those courts without providing any compensation or contributing to the cost of that assistant DA.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Then this would make it a permissible situation if they decide to move away from that philosophy, or does this kind of mandate that they continue to do it but also pay for it?
Representative Barrett.
Yes, Leader, it is always permissible for a municipality to decide whether or not they want to have concurrent jurisdiction. They are not required to have that.
Thank
Leader
you.
Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This just saying if this is the case and you've decided this is something you want to do, then you need to pay whatever the DA conference, the DA in that district decide what the compensation should be, and they get to determine all of that, and then the municipality that does it have to bear the cost of that. Is that a correct statement?
Representative Barrett.
That is exactly correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair
Are
and
the-
sponsor.
Are there other questions? Seeing none, now we're voting on House Bill 2205. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 2205 goes to calendar and rules. The next item on our calendar is Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Chair Lady. I know I'm out of order, but while we were talking about district attorneys, I would like to recognize my public defender from the 21st Judicial District, Greg Burleson. How you doing, Greg?
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
The next item on our agenda is House Bill 1725. That's our Representative Gant. Representative Gant, at your desk. I have a motion and a second. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is brought by our Treasurer's Office, Treasurer Lillard. And what this does, it requires a portion of the appropriated funds for the Length of Service Award Program known as LOSAP for volunteer firefighters in each fiscal year to be used to pay expenses incurred for the administration of the program.
For the sponsor's explanation, are there questions? Seeing none, we're voting on House Bill 1725. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 1725 goes to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Chairman.
Next on our calendar is House Bill 2715 by Representative Garrett. Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This piece of legislation, House Bill 2715, according to the Comptroller's case-weighted study, Sumner County is one of the counties in need of a judge, along with several other counties. So what this legislation does is creates one trial court judge in the 18th Judicial District, which is Sumner County. So with that, Madam Chairman, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you. And I would note, for the record, there is a funding letter for this to cover the fiscal cost. Are there questions of the sponsor? Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for the record, sponsor, we talked about this in Budget Subcommittee, but just for the record, the creation of this came out of the caseload, the task force that did the caseload study and provided recommendations back to the body. Is that correct? Am I explaining that correctly? Where did he go?
Representative Garrett.
Yes, you're correct, Leader Camper. That's right.
All right, thanks.
Additional questions or clarifications? Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I appreciate Representative Garrett carrying this much-needed bill. But there are three other jurisdictions, and I believe it was the 23rd, 19th, and 4th, that same weighted caseload study indicates definitely need a judge this year. So committee, as we are considering the full budget and the proposal that is before us, I hope that we will seriously consider filling those other three much-needed positions and three judgeships that would complete at least the beginning portion. It is time for that weighted caseload study to be updated, and to the leader's point, that way we would have additional recommendations. But those three other positions are definitely needed right now. Just my opinion. Thank you.
Seeing no other hands, hearing no other calls for recognition, we are voting on House Bill 2715. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. 2715 goes to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and committee.
That does complete our bill calendar for today, and we will now move to our budget hearings. Members, please remember your dashboard has the presentation documents. And without objection, we are now out of session. And we would ask the Commissioner of Transportation / Deputy Governor / all-around Wonder Man, Mr. Ely. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thank
And-
you, Chair
Chairman
Hazelwood.
Whitson has offered if you, get tired and want someone to step in, he feels that he can do the presentation since he's
I'm sure
seen
he
it a number
can.
of times.
I think he's heard this a few times. So, thank you, Chair Hazelwood and members of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you today. I'm joined at the table today by our bureau chiefs, and as we get into the questions, they'll introduce themselves and be able to answer those questions. We've had a few opportunities to present already this year in various settings, and so I'm going to keep my comments really short. We're going to keep our presentation really short so that we make sure that we have plenty of time for members to be able to ask any questions that you may have. You know, with the passage of the Transportation Modernization Act last year, the General Assembly passed overwhelmingly really the next generation of transportation for Tennessee. And so we are very appreciative of that. And with that support came an additional $3.3 billion investment in future transportation in Tennessee. And so one of the things that this body asked for as we went through that process was as we went through session was to come back and report to you in December how we would expend that $3.3 billion. And so we did that in December, and we laid out a plan that that not only showed how we would spend those $3 billion, but also looked out to how we could make sure that we had a plan to make sure that we were able to fund and identify the funding for 10 years of projects that we could actually finish what we start. And I know that I heard from many of you over the last couple of years about being able to get projects done. And so this is kind of a new commitment to finish what we start. And so I'm excited that this plan allows us to be able to begin to do that. We've prioritized, we've identified a stream of revenue for every single project in that program to be able to make sure that we not only are able to do the upfront engineering, then the right of way, but that we're actually able to do the construction as part of that process. So we appreciate that opportunity. I'm going to now turn it over to our CFO, Mr. Jiglio. Go ahead, Mr.
All right.
Galbato.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair of Committee, Deputy Commissioner Joe Galbato, Chief Financial Officer. So we're going to go through these slides, as the Commissioner said, very quickly. So first one, we want to talk about the cost increases we have for fiscal 25. The air carriers, the major air carriers, so Tri-Cities, Knoxville, Chattanooga, Nashville, and Memphis, came to present to the transportation committees earlier this year, talking about their 5-year financial plan. And so as part of this plan, they need $23 million in fiscal 25 to keep their plan moving ahead. Previous to this, in fiscal 24, they received a recurring allocation of $59.5 million, and this $23 million will get them to the $82 million that they need to move forward. The $1 million you see for general aviation is simply due to the fact that we anticipate in fiscal 25 that the FAA and the FAA's IIJA funding will be reduced by $1 million. So this $1 million influx will keep our general aviation funding at its current levels. And I'll have Preston talk about the beautification.
All right, there we go. Hello? Got it. Good afternoon, Preston Elliott, Deputy Commissioner, Chief of Planning. The $5 million is non-reoccurring as part of the governor's conservation agenda for highway beautification. There are 5 program components to it. One is establishing a formal roadside for gateways Oftentimes in projects, for example, in Chattanooga on I-24/75 and then I-55 Crump in Memphis, we often, from citizens hear a desire to see more landscaping and beautification as part of our projects. This is an element of this program, as well as working with communities to add additional pollinators to gardens as part of green space opportunities. A key component also is addressing encroachment of overgrowth and invasive species, at some of our scenic overlooks and areas along our highway beautification program, scenic byway corridors. And then lastly is wildflower plantings and other opportunities for pollinators and beautification at rest areas.
All right, moving forward, we have no more supplemental requests for fiscal '24, no reductions for '25. So we'll go to our revenue analysis slide. So on the federal side, if you remember, I've said before, the IIJA is our 5-year transportation bill out of Washington, started fiscal '22. As we progress year to year in the IIJA, each year our funding goes up about $20 million. This specific year, it goes up 24. Those numbers were in the funding tables that were distributed at the beginning of the act. There's another $7 million of increases, miscellaneous puts and takes between FAA, FTA, and FHWA that were not in the tables, and we have included those going forward. On the state side, should be pretty easy to understand. We had the Transportation Modernization Act last year. It had $3.3 billion coming. We don't expect that to be reoccurring this year. In addition, there were some non-reoccurring issues last year, the Knoxville pedestrian bridge, an infusion of Fentress County, as well as the Music City Airport. Those will be counteracted by the stuff we talked about on the first slide. As far as local participation, as far as revenues on federal and state projects, we don't anticipate any major change. This next slide. So this next slide, as TDOT CFO, this is the most important slide I've got. You have heard me say ad nauseum for the last few years, our revenue growth is sure to be slowing, and it's not staying up with inflation. And so the commissioner will talk about inflation on the next slide, but what I want to impart on everybody is that that slide is going to show 11% inflation per year, just on the building projects that we use, concrete, asphalt, et cetera. And so you can see there's nothing on this slide, on the revenue slide, that calls for 11% increase in revenue. So looking to the slide, on fiscal 20, we came out of COVID, earning 4% more each year in fiscal 21 and fiscal 22. In fiscal 23, I put an asterisk there because if you look down in fiscal 23, gas, diesel, and special petroleum are all basically the same as they were in the previous year. But the vehicle registration is down due to this body allowing a one-time vehicle registration holiday for the state portion of the fees. If those same fees had occurred in fiscal 23 from fiscal 22, you'd have almost the exact same amount of collections, $1.112 billion versus $1.113 billion. So I want to call your attention to fiscal 24 and 25. We don't anticipate any major changes either. In fact, I don't have the final results from F&A yet, but our fiscal year starts in July, and I know the exact collections through January 31st, and they are dead on what we collected for the first year of 23. So we don't expect any increases for 24 and 25. Commissioner?
Yeah. So just to reiterate a second what Joe has laid out. I mean, we know, and we've talked about this over the last year or two with this body, in that we're looking at kind of level revenues, no growth in our gas tax, and yet enormous need as far as being able to continue to carry out what we need to do from a transportation standpoint. And so what Joe just laid out, this chart shows the increased inflation impacts that we are seeing. And many members here, I'm looking at Chairman Zachary, over the last couple of years have emphasized the impacts that we're looking at with inflation. And really, it just really recognizes what we put into this plan as we lay this out was a 3% increase in cost. And so, if you look back over the last 5 years, our average has been less than that. If you look over the last year, it's been much more than that. And so, we just simply point this out to make sure that this committee understands how we've gone through this process of laying these numbers out to make sure that you recognize that as inflation goes up or down, it's going to continue to impact how this 10-year plan or how our future our future projects come about. So, Will?
Good afternoon, committee. Thank you, Madam Chair. Will Reed, Deputy Commissioner, Chief Engineer. To the Commissioner's point, I want to give you a real-life example of what the Commissioner is alluding to in one particular area. So it's not just the number of projects that suffer as a result of inflation eating away at our buying power. This is interstate and state route pavement condition back to 2012. So we measure our pavement condition based on a pavement quality index where we have a target for what we consider good for both state routes and interstates. If you will notice, since 2012, let's just look at the interstates, the blue line. We have gone from nearly 80% of our network being good to right at 51% of our network being good. Again, the reason that's important, if you draw your attention to the green dots out to the right, going back to 2020, we are increasing the dollars we are putting into maintenance, resurfacing, and maintaining our network every year in the attempt to keep up with how much inflation is eating away at those dollars. So this is just one snapshot example of how we want to be able to make good on the fact that we have always had some of the best roads in the country. And that's because we take care of what we have first. And we're putting those dollars there. Of course, as the costs of goods and services continue to go up, it's harder to keep that percentage of good on our state routes and our interstates where it needs to be. Commissioner?
Yes. So just in final, thank you for the opportunity to be here. We are excited about the progress that this body has allowed us to make with the investments that you are making in transportation, and we're excited about how we're putting that to good work very quickly. And so we appreciate the opportunity to do that. And so with that, Chair Hazelwood, I'll turn it over to you for questions.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you all for being here today for your presentation. And it's always sobering when you look at those charts and graphs and realize, even though we're making huge investments in transportation in the state, it's a very high hill that we're trying to climb. And inflation obviously is a huge hindrance to us continuing to keep our roads at the level that we'd like, as well as the reduced funding from gas tax and that sort of thing. So we appreciate your the department's good management of the funds that you have. You're thinking outside the box a bit, and when we're talking about the things of choice lanes and the other ways to stretch state dollars. So we are very appreciative of the work that you do. First on my list for questions is Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome Commissioner Ely and your team. I've got a couple of questions about highway beautification, and Deputy Commissioner Elliott has already told us quite a bit on how that will look. Planting vegetation, maybe trimming back some unwanted vegetation in some areas. So we have some information on that. I guess I want to first ask a little bit about litter and litter pickup. My perception is when I drive around the state, I see a lot of trash and litter on the side of interstates. It seems like it's not just a little bit, it's everywhere. Now, I'm mostly on I-24, but there's a tremendous amount of trash there. I've heard it said you could build a car with all the parts along the interstate. I also am in East Tennessee a little bit, and there's a lot of trash on I-40. But even if you get off our interstates, there's a tremendous amount of litter on just highways. I'm in surrounding states occasionally, at least once a year, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama. And my perception is I don't see as much trash on the roads in those states, maybe nowhere near as much. So maybe one challenge I'm going to offer is when you go on a trip, look at the trash on the Tennessee roads until you get to the state line, and then look at the amount of trash and litter in the neighboring state that you go to. My perception is that we've got more than anybody. And I know as Tennesseans, we're proud. We've got beautiful topography. There's no doubt about that. So I guess that leads me to my question, and that is, what does your department do about picking up trash
Yeah.
and litter? Do we have a program to do that? And then as a follow-up on that, could any of this 5 million in non-recurring beautification funds be used to just get some trash picked up?
Yeah. Well, so, thank you, Chairman, because I pretty much totally agree with you. So just to be clear, I think that's the reason the governor came forward with this proposal to put some additional dollars into looking at beautification. And I mean, we're still figuring out how we'll utilize that. I mean, originally we were hoping to make that recurring, but this year was not the year to try to do that. And so we'll continue talking about that. As you recall, either last year or the year before, we put an additional $4 million that when I was at F&A, an additional $4 million into doing more litter pickup routes in the state. And so we recognize it's a problem. I mean, so just to be open with you, that we agree with you that we need to do. Now, we're looking at how we compare to other states in that process. I can tell you that I spent 20 years in this business in which litter pickup was a part of the role of the company that I ran, that we did. And I used to say that I could build a whole house. I could build a whole house with what we picked up on the side of the road. I mean, from all the different things that are thrown off of vehicles or lose. So it is an issue that I believe from a Tennessee standpoint is the reason that we at least are making progress with putting some additional emphasis on beautification and saying, let's really focus on this year and say, what can we do? Some of this will be focused at our borders, at our welcome centers and those kind of places where people are coming into the state. But we certainly feel like that it's a major emphasis that we need to pay attention to. So did you want to add to that?
I want to speak to one part of it, but I believe will address the larger question that you have. So through our highway beautification program, a lot of our activities deal at the county level and through like adopt a highway type activities. So a lot of it is with volunteers, and we see great success through those programs. But the items that you're speaking to, I think Will can best address.
Thank you, Preston. Yeah, again, Will Reed, Deputy Commissioner, Chief Engineer. Just for level setting, we spend $25 million per year on litter. We have 52 cycles on our interstate where we pick up litter every week. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of just how big of an issue it is, because obviously when I drive down all of our roads, I look at everything, including litter, and it seems like we just come through there last week and we've already got a mess on our hands. So there's a significant issue out there. We recognize it, but just wanted you to know that's we have $25 million that we have contracts for litter pickup and sweeping on all of our interstates and state routes, and put a pretty significant investment in that. And as Commissioner mentioned, increased that even more last year. Still not keeping pace, not where we want to be, appreciate the comment and the question, but just to let you know, that's where we are as of today. Also, we also use our in-house staff to pick up large litter. So not only do we contract, we also supplement with our staff picking up large litter on our highways.
Well, and I appreciate your comments, and I'm not trying to be critical. In fact, I'm excited about the 5 million in non-recurring funds for beautification. I think that's great news. Sounds like that's more for vegetation, and it sounds like we have another pot of 25 million that's more for litter pickup, so that they're kind of in different areas. And so I'm glad to hear that. I might suggest that we pick up litter right before we mow, when it's
Yeah,
kind of
we do.
growing season.
Yes, sir.
Glad we have it. I encourage us to do as much as we can. Commissioner Ely, I know where there's a lazy boy recliner for the house you're going to build, and it's been there for way more than 1 week. So I think we've missed a few weeks on
Yes,
I-24.
sir.
Anyway, thank you for listening to my comments on that.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Thank you, Commissioner and team, for being here. Appreciate you guys coming to Cookeville a few months ago. So it's good to see y'all and loving on my little community there. They panicked about roads, but I appreciate that so much. I can't miss the opportunity, though. I saw some guy we all used to know, somebody we used to know. His name's Paul Diggs. He's in the back. So I guess you guys would recognize him. He feels so weird sitting on the back row instead of the front row, but anyway, it's good to see you, Paul. But I had a couple questions about the aviation fund. The aviation fund and I go way back. It's kind of a love-hate relationship. But the aviation fund, I know she put $23 million in this year, and then you referenced the $1 million for general aviation. Give me an idea, if you don't mind, where that gets us as it relates to our commitments, or where we want to be, at the height of, it looks like at the height of our aviation fuel tax, we were generating about, the highest amount was maybe 12 years ago, it was about $50 million. Of course, as we change things, that reduces over time. So tell us where we are on where we want to be, what this year looks like with this new revenue.
Yeah. Let me give you a brief opening, and then Joe can give the details. But I believe, we've talked about it in this committee, that we need a multimodal, looking at aviation, looking at transit, looking at roads, all facets of transportation. And not only in transportation, we need to look at our general aviation airports, which are very important to many of our communities throughout the state of Tennessee, as well as our 5 larger big airports. And so we worked very closely with them over the last 5 years to look at what their future needs are and how we can participate in that. And we can look back at the numbers, and Joe can give you that, but we have studied what we need to maintain our general aviation airports just at the same level of service that have been at now. And so that's what we have been funding for the last few years. Our objective and the governor's objective has been, let's make sure that our general aviation airports are able to keep doing what they've been doing. And then the commercial airports laid out a plan of what they wanted to achieve utilizing some investment. And so we have tried to achieve that over the last few years. And so we've done that. And what the governor's budget represents, it's a little, Joe can explain it, but it doesn't look quite right, because we've only got $1 million in general aviation, but that's because of what we're getting on the federal side. And so we're taking all of that into account. Joe?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So if it pleases you, we do have some slides on aviation funding, both from the federal side and the state side. Would that help you understand it, or?
I don't really think that's necessary as much. The reason why I asked the question, last year we had $56.3 million for air carrier support. We had $20.5 million. When you look at those numbers, I think those were non-recurring investments or recurring investments.
Recurring last year.
And so these monies also recurring?
No, the 23 million and the 1 million are non-recurring.
Yeah, I guess that's the reason how we're going to spend this 23 and 1, because if we have 56.3 million recurring and the highest rate of return that general aviation and airports, our big five, particularly use this money to draw down federal dollars at usually like a 1090 match, which allows them to spend a lot more money because they're using this revenue to do that. And so, in order to keep that original commitment to try to get back to where we were in the height of our aviation fuel tax, it's kind of we're there. So I wondered, what are we spending the 23 million and the 1 million on?
So on the general aviation, so the whole idea is to try to congregate federal funds and state funds to get somewhere around $50 million a year to keep general aviation in their state of good repair today. Now, I'll also tell you that from the slides we had earlier, that 50 million, we generated that number here a couple of years ago. God bless you. So there are inflationary impacts to general aviation as well, but we're trying to keep it at 50 million today. The extra money on the air carrier side was to support what they want for their 5-year strategic plan to keep their state of good repair, but also for their expansion ideas as well.
Well, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that, if we're investing state dollars into state programs, then those entities ought to reflect the wishes of the state as well. It just can't be a one-way street. I will say I have had, in my full-time, part-time job, I have had the opportunity of spending a lot of time with JP and Evan in your TDOT Aeronautics. Fantastic team, doing a great job. Appreciate the hard work they're doing. They make me look a lot smarter on most days. So please send my thanks to them as well. Thank you.
We can review those numbers with you, Chairman, but if you look back over the last few years, we've made substantial investment and improvement in the long-term dollars. And as we have drawn down the jet fuel tax, as you know, that y'all reduced, we put more dollars into recurring, which is one of the reasons that these dollars represent that. And so we've invested more in aviation, both in commercial and general aviation over the last few years than we've done in a number of years prior to that. So thank you, sir.
And I'll just comment, Friday night, I was actually at an event in Chattanooga where they opened the new concourse at the Chattanooga airport, which again is part of their long-term strategic plan. And I think we all know how critical air transportation is to economic development and growth, particularly as Tennessee seeks to attract more national and international companies. They need to have those kinds of air connections. So I was very excited to see the concourse there. And I know there are other airports, commercial airports in the state also with expansion plans. And these dollars will help them to get there. Next on the list is Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Chair Lady and Commissioner and team. Good seeing y'all again. Commissioner, this question has to do more with what you started talking about, the finish what we start plan that y'all came up with on the 10-year plan and, to prioritize your stream of revenue. I got 3 questions. But first, last December, the department released its 10-year plan. To further the department's goals on the 10-year or the Transportation Modernization Act, the department is recosting and funding all 36 remaining projects in the department's current 3-year plan. This will utilize just a little over $500 million from the $3 billion budget in state funding, which was appropriated last year under the Transportation Modernization Act. My question, sir, is what methodology did the department use to recost the remaining projects? And I have 2 other questions after that.
Great. Yeah. Great question, Chairman. And per Chair Hazelwood's comment at the beginning, do you want to come down and answer that question?
This is the 3rd time I asked it this year.
You probably answer it better than I, but
no, sir, not at all.
So I'm gonna defer to our chief engineer over here, but I will say that we've it's no secret. I mean, we've all experienced huge inflation and cost increases over the last few years. And a lot of the numbers that were used back in the day when we were putting numbers on the Improve Act back in 2016, 17. We're done in a way that like we just need to get numbers out here to make sure we've got a ballpark number. And now as we have recosted a lot of those numbers, what we've tried to do is to really true up and be accurate and be honest and with and direct with the body. And so you know, what that means is that, you know, the cost is gone up tremendously. Will?
Yeah, thank you again, Will Reed, Chief Engineer. We looked at several things. So we always keep basically rolling averages of all of the unit prices for the items that go into any of our contracts. So the projects that you referred to in the 3-year plan can be in one of 3 stages. They can be in preliminary engineering right away or in the construction phase. And dependent on which phase they're in, means there's a difference in the amount of time before it goes to contract. So based on the phase it's in, we would look at when we apply or how many years we apply that inflation to. But the best thing that we have is historical data based on real world examples that are coming in. We have 8 lettings a year where we look at contracts that we let where we let contracts bid them, basically is what letting is a term we use. That's data that we use to go back and look at how can we calibrate those numbers. And to be honest, we are seeing some of the highest prices we have ever seen. Just to give you a couple of examples, we've got some graphs here. If we can, our largest expense is asphalt. If we can get to that, yeah, here we go, right here. Since 2018, you can see that 47% increase in asphalt prices. So that's a pretty volatile market. That's actually not our worst one. If you look at concrete, that's a 77%. So we follow these historical trends and pay very close attention to these, but it's important that we do it at the right time based on what inflation is running when we're going to let the project. The other thing we have to look at is right-of-way costs. Right-of-way costs are a little bit harder to, it's a more inexact science than figuring out what a yard of concrete costs. So that's something we actually have outside entities come in and look at what we're doing to give us an objective viewpoint to make sure that we are in line with best practices from a national standpoint, as well as, you know, what other neighboring DOTs or peers are doing. So it's really a combination of a lot of sources, but there's no substitute for real world data that we collect 8 times a year when we let projects.
Chairman Whitson.
Yes, and my final question, of the 36 projects included in the 3-year plan, which were recost and funded, were any of these projects from the Improve Act? And if not, why not? And can the department provide an update on where they are with the completion of these Improve Act projects?
Answer is yes. I mean, we put a priority on Improve Act. Will, you want to answer? Joe?
So Chairman, for the whole 10-year plan, 72 of those 93 projects are from the Improve Act. So we prioritize that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Chairman Moon.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady and Commissioner Ely. I want to thank you for working with my local elected officials a week or so ago. Continuing on the 10-year plan, bridge replacements. I know there's a plan to replace the I-55 Memphis, Arkansas bridge. Project's estimated at $1 billion. TDOT in Arkansas applied for a federal grant, and they're aiming to get half of it from the federal government and split it with Arkansas. Can you tell us what the requirements of the federal grant are? And when do you think TDOT will know if the grant application's approved? Now, I've got a couple of follow-ups.
Thank you, Chairman Moon. First of all, let me just, I'm going to turn it over to Preston to kind of give you an update, because we just had a call yesterday with our federal partners about this project, and so we've got an update for you. But let me just say that there are not many projects that are more vital than that project for our state, because I-55 project. That bridge over I-55 was built 74 years ago. It is not seismically retrofitted as our I-40 bridge is, thanks to you. And it's already over capacity, you know, I mean, so what we decided is that there's a federal grant program that is perfectly suited for this, that allows us to apply for a grant that would pay for half of the construction cost. We're estimating it to be about $1 billion. It hadn't been designed yet, so we don't know exactly, but we're estimating to be about $1 billion, in which case the grant pays for half of this project. And because it's between Memphis and Arkansas, Arkansas has agreed to pony up a quarter of it, 250 million or whatever that turns out to be, and we would do the other 250. So we've got an opportunity here to get a $1 billion asset to upgrade what we're trying to achieve for $250 million. And so the reason I want to spend a minute here is because I want to make sure everybody realizes, going back to last year in the Modernization Act, you know, we reserve dollars in each region to be able to spend in each region. And we've reserved 250 million in the Memphis region, or Region 4, as a direct result of that. And so that's the money that we're saying that we would utilize for this, because Will could explain more. We probably don't want to get into it here, but as we've gone through the process of the choice lane, we found that Memphis area, that our utilization for this and getting this new bridge was a better, higher use for those $250 million funds than a potential choice lane supplement or investment. And so, Preston, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll speak to the grant aspect. So as part of IIJA, there's a discretionary grant program called BIP. It's a Bridge Investment Program. And they actually have two programs related to the bridge program. And one is for projects that are over 100 million, and those that are under 100 million. And this particular one is considered large, and it's over 100 million. And it's specifically for bridge replacement. So not creating a new bridge, but a replacement. As you're probably well aware, this is a project in terms of added improvement across the Mississippi has probably been discussed for more than 2 decades, maybe 3 decades. And so we started a study effort about 1.5 years ago, looking at what we called a targeted approach to best understand. And the conclusion is that regardless if you added another bridge across the Mississippi, by the time you do that, you would need to replace the current bridge. As the commissioners mentioned, it's over 75 years old and is not seismic. So where we're at the end of December, we had submitted for the BIP grant, and just I think about 2 weeks ago received a preliminary information on our application. And basically, we had a debrief yesterday. And we are given a two-week window, 14 days. So by March 18th, we need to resubmit some supplemental information. But I will tell you that the dialogue and feedback that we received was very positive, but it will require us to do some additional analysis for the grant application and then resubmit by March 18th.
So again, when do you think the final decision may be made?
So
we asked that question yesterday.
Yeah, it was a little murky, but in general, we do know this. They start the next cycle for their application in August. So they would have to know before then.
Madam Chair, got a
Go ahead,
couple of
Chairman Lynn.
follow-ups. What if it's denied? Do you have a plan B?
I don't have a plan B. I always have plan A's. And I think we've got a good opportunity here. But assuming that we are not awarded this, they've made it very clear that this is a rolling process. So it'll simply roll into next year. There's still funds available that they will have for the next year process. I can't imagine anything that is more needed or necessary. So I still feel like we've got a really good opportunity, but the plan B would be that we would just continue to roll right in. You want to say something?
Yeah, I would just add, Representative, that 2 points. First off, I'd like to again thank this body and the governor and everyone. The investment made in the Transportation Modernization Act, as the Commissioner pointed out, to have the cash on hand to be able to make up our piece of the match has put us in a very good position compared to our peers that are chasing this grant. The other thing that doesn't get talked about as much, and it goes to your question about schedule, the other part of the TMA, you gave us additional authority for innovative delivery or alternative delivery methods. If we were to receive this grant, part of it stipulates that we would have to go to construction in fiscal 26, which is in our world is right around the corner. The ability to deliver this project via an alternative delivery method puts us in a position to be competitive with that. So just wanted to thank this body for the authority to be able to do that.
That sounds great. So how long do you anticipate, what would be, how long would the bridge be shut down? How long will it take to replace the
that's
bridge?
A great question. Which one do y'all want to answer?
I'll take it.
Yeah, that's
So
a great
I'm glad they're
question.
letting
Yeah.
the engineer talk bridge
Yeah,
questions because this is
they can do better than me.
This is our Super Bowl. I'll just tell you, this is what we live for. So first off, we're going to build the new bridge. The scheme right now, we're going to build the new bridge right next to the old one, so there would be no shutdown in traffic. So we would build it right next to the other one. As far as construction time, we're looking at about 4 years based on what we're looking at right now. But again, it's very early in the process, so that will be refined as we move forward.
But you'd build you'd build the new first part of the new bridge next to the old bridge while it was still operating. And then after that, you tear down the old bridge and build the next piece. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Yeah.
Next
Yes.
on my list is Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioner and team. Let's spend a few minutes talking about choice lanes, if you don't care. Actually, for the benefit of the millions of Tennesseans that are watching at home, because they heard the deputy governor was going to be here, so I'm sure it's millions that are watching. Could you just tell us what, or just define choice lanes for us? When we say choice lanes, what are we referencing?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. I mean, very simply, choice lanes, as we have talked a lot about in the last year or so, is a vehicle to allow us to partner with the private sector to invest in adding lanes. So we're talking about maintaining the existing general purpose lanes that we have today and adding additional lanes, which would allow people, if they so choose, to get into, to be able to get to where they're going for a certain place at a certain time. And so it is entirely a choice. That's the reason we call them choice lanes. Nobody has to get in them. They can continue in the other lanes. And what we have found from all the other states that we have worked with as we developed this this process is that every place that has these choice lanes or managed lanes around the country, it not only benefits those obviously that are getting in those choice lanes to pay a fee to get to that point, whether it's a soccer game or another business appointment. What it does do as well is ease the pain in the other general purpose lanes so that those general purpose lanes go faster as well for everybody that chooses that day that they don't get in that lane. And so it's a benefit that has been demonstrated and proven both in the general purpose as well as the choice lanes. So that's a short version. Happy to expound on that. But
I got a few questions, Madam
Yeah.
Chair, if you don't care.
Go ahead, Chairman
Yeah.
Zachary.
So based on, thank you for that explanation. I just think it's important to remind Tennesseans because we kind of forget they hear choice lanes and then somehow it can kind of morph into toll roads, which is completely the opposite of what we're doing here. So thank you for that explanation. As part of the 10-year plan, we're evaluating choice lanes in Knoxville, Nashville, and Chattanooga, is my understanding. And there is some concern about costs associated with specifically Knoxville and Chattanooga and the public commitment that may be involved. Can you speak to that just a little bit as we
Sure.
were evaluating options? And well, let me ask this way first. Can you, based on the metrics that were used to evaluate Knoxville, Nashville, Chattanooga, how are we determining who goes first? What does that look like? And then if you could just kind of speak to specifically Chattanooga and Knoxville and maybe some of the public money that'll need to be
Okay.
contributed.
I'll start, and one of these guys may chime in. But so if you go back and look at a year ago when we were here talking about choice lanes and in the advent of managed lanes and what that means, what we talked about was that we had done congestion studies in all 4 major urban areas from Memphis, Knoxville, Chattanooga, Nashville, and that all of those areas had stopped, had break points in areas where we felt like that there were opportunities where choice lanes might work. And so what we were asking for is utilization of the $3 billion to put aside some of those dollars to be able to continue to advance that conversation. And so that's what we've been doing. So we didn't want to get ahead of you over the last year. So we didn't really start that process till after you passed the Modernization Act. So from April last year till you asked us to report back in December, which we did, and we laid out how we would utilize those funds. And so what we found is we just described here, Memphis, the choice lane didn't make as much sense as a new bridge across I-55 made sense to utilize some of those funds. But we found certainly in the Middle Tennessee area that there was need, as well as in Knoxville and as well as in Chattanooga. So we're what we have recommended is that I-24, because we think it is the one that comes closest to paying for itself from an economic feasibility standpoint, be the first lane that we proceed with. The other lane in the Middle Tennessee area that we feel like has potential is the I-65 corridor. But at the same time, we also feel like that Knoxville and Chattanooga continue bearing more research as part of the process. Our consultants are doing traffic and revenue studies to look at how much traffic is coming through, what is the revenue potential of those. And so what we're trying to do is just simply balance the amount of traffic coming through, how much congestion is there, and how do we make sure that we optimize the dollars that this legislature has put forth for us to utilize for that purpose.
And then can you speak to the concern about Knoxville and Chattanooga specifically and the possible requirement of additional?
I'll let Will get into more detail on that.
Yeah, so appreciate the question, Representative. I think one of the things we have to keep in mind here is this is for the P3 model to work, this is a partnership. And for the partnership to work, there have to be 2 willing partners to go into business together, if you will. So if we are trying to reduce the government contribution or our contribution to the greatest extent possible, there has to be enough revenue to pay for the cost of the project. So one of the things that we've done, this is not just TDOT or someone working with us selecting a project. This is taking all those data points and looking at what are we looked at 30 segments all over the state, all in Nashville, Memphis, Chattanooga, all the major urban areas, and ranked those based on what were the ones that were in the best position to generate revenue to reduce that government contribution as much as possible. So there are a lot of different levers that have to be pulled that bring those to the top. And frankly, that's where at least at this point, I-24 right now today generates those better numbers. That being said, Knoxville, Chattanooga, and there's other corridors across the state that as growth continues, they are going to become more and more viable candidates. part of this process was a market sounding exercise where we actually talked to 17 different entities from all over the world that gave us input on what are the facilities they see in Tennessee that have the potential to generate revenue that would offset the cost of the project. So it's a little bit, at least it has been for me, a little bit different mindset than, being an engineer that there's a traffic problem, you go out and you solve it. Well, in this case, we are looking at leveraging private sector dollars to come in and help us reduce the cost of a project. They have to get something out of it too. So it's a little bit different way for us to be thinking about it. So I think it's not a question of if, it's a question of when for all of these corridors. As Tennessee continues to grow and all of our urban areas experience the growth that they have, it's really a question of when, not if.
And then last question, Madam Chair. So has there been any discussion, or are we too early in the process to determine the assessment fees and what the structure of those are going to be for those who utilize choice lanes?
Let me take the first shot at that. So as part of the Transportation Modernization Act, we contemplated what are other states doing to make sure that the state has oversight as part of that process. So as part of the Modernization Act, you established the Transportation Modernization Board, and that board has appointees by both speakers as well as the governor. The Commissioner of Transportation is on it. Who else is on it? An appointee by the governor as well. So as part of that process, they will authorize what I will call a pricing methodology, because as we talked about in this committee a year ago, we are not going to give over to any other entity the ability to charge whatever they want to charge. So as part of this process, this competitive process that'll go about, this board will approve the methodology of pricing, which will determine how much they can pay and how much people will pay at how much traffic is moving through the system. And then as part of that process, there's also a threshold where once we reach that mark, we the state share in the benefit of those funds that are coming about from that. And so we approve the methodology through this board so that as we go through the RFP process, the competitive process, then all those companies are proposing on the same thing. So everybody's dealing on a level playing field, and they understand what they'll have to pay when. And so that's the way to make it competitive. It's the way to make it fair. Everybody's on the same playing field and part of the process.
Just one final comment, Madam Chair, and I'd be remiss if I did not advocate for Knox County and just as one of the metro area that has just primarily one interstate going through at 40 and the 75-40 merger. I mean, it is becoming crippling, as you well know. The impact we've got at the Campbell Station exit specifically, which is in my district and has been something that we've discussed. It's just the desperate need and attention to those areas. Just would like to remind you of that, as you well know, and just advocate on behalf of my constituents. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman. Thank you,
Well, if Chairman Zachary's going to advocate, then I'm compelled to do so as well. And Commissioner, I know I don't have to tell you this because you come to Chattanooga to visit your grandchildren, so you will know what a mess it can be getting into town and through the Ridge Cut and around the river and all that. So we still look forward to choice lanes and relief. Representative Hicks of Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you, Commissioner Ely, and your team. Appreciate you being here. I miss being on transportation, so thank you for being here. We're going to change subjects here. It's going to do with vacancies. So as of March 4th, yesterday, the department has 667 vacant positions 209 of which have been vacant for 12 plus months. Last year, TDOT eliminated 500 vacant positions and kept the salary equity to provide salary adjustments. So here's my questions. How are the department's vacancies affecting its ability to complete its current and planned projects?
Let me start, and then one of these guys can chime in. So first, I would say, Representative Hicks, you're kind of preaching to my choir here in your question, because one of the things that that I have felt like we needed to do as I came over to TDOT is to pay our frontline people what they deserve. I mean, we've got people that are literally out there day in, day out, putting their lives in danger, and we need to pay them what they deserved. And so what we did is that we said, we've got these vacancies, and so we talked to the governor's office, and they allowed us to put back in 500 vacancies, as you stated, and to utilize the funds that we were carrying for those vacancies, those positions, to be able to invest in increasing our frontline workers. And I will tell you, which I think all of you will appreciate, is that we've been able to take the average frontline workers of TDOT up $10,000 over the last year as a result of making that change. So I want to thank this body for that, because our workers, because as we go out day in, day out to visit, they are thanking you for your investment in allowing them to stay in their jobs and allowing them to be able to maybe not take a second job, or maybe their spouse not having to take a second job, to be able to do that. And so it's a huge game changer, because we were losing people day in, day out, and that has subsided, and we're able to now keep our people better than we were then. So you want to?
Sure. To that end, so Commissioner's correct. When we relieved the 500 positions, we kept those funds, and actually the average salary statewide went up $11,000 per person, again, on average. We plan on, with these vacancies, we plan at some point probably releasing another possibly 200 vacancies at some point, once we have all the people in the different jobs that we're trying to do through our EPIC. I will also jump on top of what Commissioner said. By changing these compensation rates, our turnover rate went from 18% the previous year to about 12 this year. So we are making progress in trying to help our folks, but I think Bill wanted to talk about if it's impacting the vacancies, if it's impacting our ability to deliver projects.
So yeah, I'd like to speak to that just real quick, Representative. Just to kind of the way we've looked at this is, many of you know how we went through a prioritization process and reduced the number of projects that, frankly, that we were working on. So we are trying to make better use of the employees' time that we do have and be more efficient, and frankly, run more like a business. Give you a quick stat. Up until 2022, we had a performance measure internally of number of projects listed in the 3-year plan that were scheduled for construction, the number of which actually went to contract. That performance metric was 80%. Up until 2022, the last time we hit that was 2011. Since 2022, we are hitting at a 90% clip as a result of the changes we've made with EPIC, the changes we've made with bringing our staff, our compensation up to the point where we could attract the best and brightest to come to work for TDOT. So we're kind of looking at it in terms of what can we do internally. We talk a lot about budget shortfalls and those sorts of things. I want to assure this committee that we're also looking at what can we do at TDOT to better run this agency more like a business, to make use of every dollar that we do get. Even how we manage our human resources, not just the resources we get in terms of dollars.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I believe you just about answered every question I have. I got one more question. What positions are you seeing the highest vacancy rates, and what are you doing to fill those positions? I think that's the last question. Thank you.
Well, at this point, most of those vacancies rely in Budget Code 404, which is just our general workers that are out in the field. So we're trying to reclassify those to the right positions so we get people moving up in the organization.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for those answers. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Chairman Hicks of Hawkins.
I thought you were going to say the real Chairman Hicks.
Chairman Hicks of Washington, do you have a comment you'd like to make?
Commissioner, good to see you. Good to see your staff as well. Changing gears just a little bit, talking about the welcome centers and the rest areas. I know that the Department of Tourism also has a stake in the welcome centers, while a third party kind of manages the rest areas. The comptroller's audit report came out. There were some issues with the managing of these two entities, or I guess the rest areas as well as the welcome centers. Can you talk a little bit about what the department is doing to make sure that we get back on track with maintaining and upkeeping our welcome centers and our rest areas?
Joe can chime in on this, but I do want to say, we've got a long history of working with Department of Tourism, with our welcome centers and our rest areas, to be able to welcome people and allow people who are traveling to the state to be able to have a place, safe place to rest. And so I'll be the first to say that we concur with the findings. I don't like any findings, but we concur with the findings, and we've already taken action to be able to have a corrective action process, to be able to correct each and every one of those findings. And some of those are with Department of Tourism, and it simply resulted from the years of functioning together where we needed to get more clarity, and we've already adopted a memorandum of understanding to where we better outline whose responsibility is what. Joe, you want to mention?
Yeah, that's correct. So just for numbers, because I'm CFO, I'm going to give you numbers. So we pay tourism about $10 million a year to manage the welcome centers. CMRA, Community Rehabilitation Agency of Tennessee, about $6 million for the rest areas. The finding really was about just not a coordinated effort as far as looking at the conditions. And so what we've done is we put people in place to try to standardize that checklist so that we don't have welcome centers under one criterion and then the rest areas under a different criterion.
And kind of expanding on that a little bit. So now that we've kind of identified a process to identify the issues, what are some of the issues with both of these? And what are we doing, I guess, really to get down to, is it a money issue? When's the last time we put money into the welcome centers and the rest areas? Is it time to put more money in? Just kind of talk a little bit about that.
So I'll speak to that a little bit, Representative Hicks. So one of the first things that was mentioned that needed to happen was clear delineation between what the responsibilities were of the Department of Transportation and the Department of Tourism. There was, as I dug into it, there's been years of history of just verbal agreements between the two agencies of who would handle what. And I actually went to my assistant chief of ops and said, okay, explain this to me. How does this actually work? And the best explanation I could get was, well, if the toilet's clogged, they do it. If it needs replacing, we fix it. And I'm like, that's not a way to run things. We've got to have a clear delineation of who's responsible for what and when. So we took care of that in the MOU that was executed in December. As far as the funding, I'll let Joe speak to that. But what I would say is that comes out of, our normal operating. We put a certain percentage in every year. If we were to have a significant issue, whether it be something like a slide that you're very familiar with, or a fire under a bridge like we had in Williamson County several years ago, we would have to make choices about where those dollars go and what we spend them on, with it being a finite amount of dollars. So that's kind of the choices of the benefit cost analysis we do every year based on what we need. Now I share the commissioner's desire to make sure that, those are the welcome centers, and the rest areas should be representatives of that. May be one of the only things that people that come through our state see. So we want to be sure that they are consistent with the standard of excellence that we have for everything else in the state of Tennessee.
And then my final question there, I guess, do we have any of welcome centers or rest areas that are no longer functioning across the state? Just curious.
There is one today that's closed down in Dixon County. I don't know if it's eastbound or westbound for major repairs. But again, nothing is closed at this point that I'm aware of.
Just to add a little bit, that typically what that in that particular case, it's a wastewater plant issue. That's one of our biggest issues, to be frank, with some of these facilities, is when one of those goes bad, it's a significant capital expense.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair, very much. I was fortunate to be in a transportation full committee this morning, and we had a good and a broad discussion about potential funding sources and where we can be in the times ahead of us. In that regard, slide 23, yes, it's slide 23 is up. You must have been reading my mind. The 10-year project plan. Several of us had disappointed districts back home, and the expectation was, hey, we're going to see something in our district, and not all of us did. Can you help us a little bit with expectations from folks back home, what we can expect in next year's 10-year plan or the next year's?
Yes, sir.
Just give us a ballpark and how to work with our local governments on expectations. Then I've got a follow-up after that, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think that's a great question, because what we try to do is to emphasize that what we want to try to accomplish is giving stability and certainty to the members and to our public, that as we start these projects and we maybe put engineering or right away or construction into the 3-year plan, that we actually get it done. And so that was one of the guiding principles that we followed through that process. However, I will emphasize to you and to the public that a plan is a plan. A 10-year process is a plan, and we're going to continue on an ongoing effort, working with cities, counties, working with our partnership program to where they invest in some of these roads. And so we'll continue to reevaluate this 10-year plan on an ongoing process every year as far as how we actually move forward in that process. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is to kind of change the narrative. We've always had looked for some investment from our local partners, but what we're finding now is that there are a number of partners, cities or counties, that are willing to make fairly major investments in being able to try to get these projects moving. And as they do that, then that allows us to kind of reevaluate our biggest bang for the buck, to be able to optimize those dollars. And so we're going to continue to do that on an annual basis as we go along, Chairman.
Chairman Hawk.
And thank you. A follow-up question, unrelated. We're talking about the I-55 bridge earlier and stated we're going to be mirroring a compatible bridge alongside the existing bridge. One of our colleagues was wondering what's the secondary market cost on that bridge. He's got an island down in the Keys, and he's looking to connect to an island in the Keys. So, what is the second? Now, truthfully, what do we do with that
Yeah.
with that bridge? Is it coming down, or what do we do with that? Thank
Well,
you.
Yeah.
Yes, that bridge would come down if the member is interested. We could see what we could work out there. I imagine the logistical the cost
Yeah.
associated with moving it would probably be more than it's worth. But no, it would be deconstructed in pieces and eventually basically go for scrap.
All right. We have other questions on our list, but we are so far behind. I am going to ask if Representative Lynn, Freeman, Miller, and Love, if you all would get me your questions, we will send them to the department and get the answers back to you. Okay. Go ahead, Representative Lynn.
Commissioner, I just wanted to say thank you. There was a public meeting last week on the new interchange, and the TDOT employees,
Yeah.
just absolutely fantastic. I can't tell you, so
Yeah.
knowledgeable. They answered everyone's questions so satisfactorily. It was really, really a great meeting. So thank you so
Great
much,
to hear. Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you.
All right, and Commissioner, thank you
Yeah.
and your team for being here. There's a lot of interest, obviously, as
Yeah.
you could see from the questions. And again, if those members, I do apologize, but we have TDEC in the wings.
All right.
Go right ahead.
Hey, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
And we are going to ask our friends from TDEC if you would come forward. We apologize for the delay, but as we said, there's a lot of things going on in transportation that the members have a lot of interest in. Yeah. You know what I mean. Commas. Yeah. I'm sorry. Commissioner, thank you for being here. I apologize for the delay, but there were just lots of questions, and we will ask members I would ask that you pay careful attention to the commissioner's presentation, and when we have questions, let's just move through those as quickly as possible and Commissioner, if you guys could be as brief as possible in your answers, that will help us get through this in a timely manner. So without further ado, please begin your presentation.
Madam Chair, thank you so much, and I will try to talk a little faster than I normally do to move this along. But a big thanks to you and members of the committee. And I'm David Salyers, Commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. With me, our Chief Operating Officer and Deputy Commissioner Karen Simo. Deputy Commissioner Greer Tidwell somewhere will be here in just a moment. And for our Bureau of Conservation, and our Chief Financial Officer, Scott Grammer, is at the table. But I'll keep my opening remarks brief. And I'll just start with saying a year ago, Governor Lee created a conservation strategy for Tennessee that's going to benefit our state for generations to come. And with the partnership with the General Assembly, we've made it a reality for Tennesseans, and it's progressing nicely. So we are continuing that this year with a proposal that's going to improve rural economies and welcome more Tennesseans to enjoy the state's beautiful natural resources, while at the same time protecting the environment, improving physical and mental health, and enhancing the quality of life for Tennesseans. The General Assembly understood that our state can grow and prosper while our environmental quality continues to improve. And Tennessee is continuing to lead the nation, in part because we have cleaner air, abundant clean water, productive land, and greater access to diverse outdoor recreational opportunities. And these investments that we propose for the FY25 budget will ensure that our state's natural beauty and rich natural heritage, the authentic Tennessee that brings visitors, families, and companies here from across the nation, will be around for future generations to enjoy. It's going to also balance economic growth with protecting and properly managing our state's natural resources. And we're really grateful for the support and leadership that we've received from the General Assembly as we have worked toward achieving these goals. So building on our conservation theme from last year, our theme this year is resources for generations. And I'm confident that that together we will continue to meet the needs and challenges of a growing and thriving and dynamic state. So now I'd like to have Greer Tidwell, our Deputy Commissioner for Bureau of Conservation, to talk about 4 newly proposed state parks as we discuss how we're going to preserve our resources for generations.
Thank you, Commissioner. Madam Chair, members, good to be together today. And how's that?
I'll do it too, if you would just identify yourself for the record.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Greer Tidwell, I serve as your Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Environment and Conservation. It's good to be here today and get to share with you a proposal for 4 new state parks. We think of the state parks as really the cornerstone of conservation, not just because the resources on those properties and the opportunities that are provided by those properties, but because of the impact they have on the visitors and our Tennesseans to learn to fall in love with Tennessee and want to take care of this great state. In that regard, I just want to share some good news. We've been focusing deeply on bringing students to the parks and bringing the parks to students. We expect this year to have touched over 100,000 students by the end of the school year. That's up about 100% from 3 or 4 years ago. So making good progress there. The 4 new parks that we're proposing this year are all on existing government lands. These photos indicate some of the iconic beauty and the experiences these parks will provide. Fort Southwest Point, with its recreation of a Revolutionary War era fort. Head of the Crow, with its beautiful trails and natural features like the Stone Arch south of Swanee. The Hiwassee and Ocoee Rivers, serving as recreation mecca for millions of visitors each year. And the archaeological site down at Cardwell Mountain, where for thousands of years, people before us have left their creative mark on the landscapes. Next slide, please. So it provided a map of the 4 parks that we're in the process of standing up with the budgeting from last year, as well as these 4 new parks that we are proposing this year. Those 4 parks from last year are well on their way. A substantial amount of the hiring has been done, the planning, and the process of building those out as real estate parks is very well underway. Fort Southwest Point, located over in Roane County, currently is managed as part of a city park. Our game plan there is to support with the management of the historical feature while the city continues to manage the recreational features of that park. This historic feature represents a very important time in Tennessee's past, literally when America's western frontier was the Cumberland Plateau back in the Revolutionary War times. Looking over at the head of the Crow down in the center southern part of the state, over 4,000 acres currently managed as part of our South Cumberland State Park over in Franklin County. This would be a new state park that actually generates a great deal of hiking and outdoor recreation opportunities, adjoining 4 state natural areas. And then over in the eastern part of the state, the Ocoee, southeastern part of the Ocoee River will be created by splitting out the current Hiwassee Ocoee River State Park that are operated as a joint park right now. Management's pretty thin right there. They're gaining in popularity, and we need to split those 2 parks up to run them efficiently and bring in all of the tourist resources that can be accomplished there. And then Cardwell Mountain, a 530-acre property down in Warren County. We already own and protect the archaeological sites at Cardwell Mountain. This is inclusive of a Native American earthen monument and rock art. And also this piece of property is adjoining the Collins River and sits on top of the Cumberland Caverns, a very important private enterprise bringing in outdoor recreation there in the Warren County and Grundy County areas. So with that, about description of those 4 new parks that we're proposing, I want to turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Karen Simo to share further about water regionalization. Thank you.
Hello, I am Deputy Commissioner Karen Simo, and it's a pleasure to be before you all. On the water regionalization, this is building on some of the continued local community interest in water infrastructure investment with the state's assistance. So we already have the State Revolving Loan Fund, which is a loan, and that has limitations around eligibility and the financial health, and then building on ARP, which we have committed over $1 billion in grants to communities across the state. Within that ARP project, we had a competitive grant. We had over $400 million in applications submitted by communities, and we only had $200 million in funding available for those competitive grants. So we are continuing to try to find ways to fund all the other communities that have projects scoped and want to continue on the water regionalization. And when you think about water regionalization, it really has to do a lot with Tennessee's rural and suburban growth. And a lot of those rural communities have small systems that struggle from some of the operational front, some of the economies of scale. And as we continue to support them working together and interconnecting and having more regional solutions, that helps those small growing communities to continue to have a longer term success and greater capacity. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Greer to discuss our Blue Ways initiative.
Thank you, Karen. As Karen was just describing the importance of rural economic success, one of the things that we've heard as we visit with rural leaders is their request to activate outdoor recreation on the rivers and streams in Tennessee. And the Blue Ways program that we're proposing in the budget is designed to do just exactly that. This budget proposal includes $20 million for a Blue Ways initiative and $10 million for further development on the Bill Dance Signature Lake program. Water recreation in Tennessee is growing rapidly. We know that paddling sports have increased 60% over the last 5 years. Boating and fishing expenditures have increased 72% in the last 5 years. The popularity of getting out on the water has grown as an outdoor recreation. It generates the kind of opportunities for getting people into our rural communities and then keeping them there for a night or two that we want to do strategically in Tennessee to help, as Karen was just saying, help those rural communities grow and thrive. With that, I'd like to shift over a little bit. We're not just proposing adding on. I want to talk just a minute about our focus on making great progress and taking care of what we have. The deferred maintenance catch-up investment that was made in the last few years of about $66 million funding, that was based on over 4,700 projects that were identified back in 2018 after review of the projects across our state parks that had maintenance issues that just hadn't been taken care of. Proud, very proud of the maintenance and park leadership teams who have pushed that forward, and over 4,100 of those 4,700 identified projects have been completed. We've been spending and using that money to try to leverage it and get the most we can for each of those dollars. We're down to about 16 million remaining. We expect for all of those 4,700 plus projects to be completed out in fiscal year 26. A couple of examples of the kind of projects we're talking about need maintenance is this replacement bridge down on the famous Fiery Gizzard Trail, just off I-24, as well as replacement kiosk, updated kiosk, like you are exemplified here from Fort Pillow out in West Tennessee. I just want to say this array of projects has improved our state parks tremendously. And thank you for trusting us to get that money on the ground quickly and efficiently and make the kind of difference that it has made. So with that, turn it over to you, Commissioner. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Greer. And certainly the governor and the General Assembly have made large historical investments in our department, and hence the state of Tennessee. So we really thank you for that. And I will like to give just an update on a couple items. I promise, Madam Chair, I'll be very brief on these. But in our Bureau of Environment, our Brownfield Reinvestment Act, which is really just getting off the ground right now, the interest that we're seeing associated with that is unbelievable. A part of that investment is a $5 million recurring grant program, and I'm very, very excited to say that we're going to be accepting applications in the next couple of months. But the application window for those opened last week, and it's going to be open for another couple of months. But we have held 2 public pre-application webinars that were attended by over 250 attendees. So we're really getting a lot of excitement around that. And you see up here on the screen, Citizens Gas and Light in Jackson, Tennessee, after brownfield remediation. So, and just very quickly on new parks, the 4 parks funded in fiscal year 24, Middle Fork Bottoms, Scotts Gulf, North Chickamauga Creek, and Devil's Backbone are well on their way to being designated new state parks. Each site is currently open, but there is still work in progress to get them prepared to be called a state park. And the picture is Virgin Falls and Scotts Gulf. Hiring and capital maintenance projects are underway at 3 of the 4 parks. Devil's Backbone is on a longer lead time due to National Park Service permitting and the review process there. Park operations staff are focused on addressing minimum criteria required to open these sites as state parks, such as staffing, safety, and security, interpretive programming, and operational needs. Middle Fork Bottom, Scotts Gulf, and North Creek Gorge are on a timeline to be open as a state park this year, this calendar year. Devil's Backbone is projected sometime in 2026. So in closing, our department is, we feel like we're investment worthy, investment ready, and investing for Tennessee's future. And with our strong partnership with the General Assembly, we're going to continue to preserve our state's beautiful natural resources while also being a trusted partner to local communities and the regulated community. So thank you, and we're happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner, and other presenters. We do have a list of questions. I'm going to begin with Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Thank you, Commissioner. One of the great things I got to hear is about how you're making parks more accessible to students and students to parks. It's great. Accessibility is really important, particularly with us and you and your department. I know that you had installed adult changing tables, which is kind of new to us last year, thanks to Chairman Doggett. It's the great work that he and others in this committee have done to make sure that we fund those. I understand that you did put one in Natchez State Park. I guess if you could give me an update on what we're doing at the other parks, maybe how many of those adult changing tables you expect to do this year, and just a relative update
Well,
on it.
I'm going to turn that back to Greer, and we do have some very exciting work going around what we term Access 2030. So Greer.
Thank you, Commissioner. And yes, those adult changing tables are life-changing, not just for our visitors that we serve with those, but in terms of our awareness of how to better serve and the learning that we're doing to do that better. So I'm looking for our list right here, and we have contracts in place now for the park in Johnsonville, Lehman Shelby, Nathan Bedford Forest, Paris Landing, Pickwick Landing. We've got 3 more to be added to that soon, and more stacked up right after that. So we've got a commitment to get those out there, and also are including that in the new structures that we're designing. So it's a retrofit program as well as a new structure program.
Thank you for that. That's really exciting. I do know that this year, Chairman Doggett in this body talking about making those grant funds to other people more accessible. Just wondered if you had any idea of what it was costing us per changing table to try to put those in. We set aside a startup grant of about $5,000 per changing table. What we're finding out is that won't touch the cost to do that. I just wondered if you guys had an idea of what maybe an average cost might be to put one of those in, either in an existing structure or in a new one.
If I may, Commissioner, sure. The answer I continue to get with that is it depends on the structure you're retrofitting, as you might imagine. And you're right, the 5,000 is kind of just a starting kind of number to get into the planning process. And I'd love to get back with you with more details on the specific cost of that project down in Natchez Trace, and glad to share the cost that we're learning for all of these as they're getting planned out. But the retrofit generates a real challenge because of the structural integrity that's required to have a safe changing table put in. So glad to get back with you with more details on all of those projects.
Okay, that'd be great. If you could supply that information to the chair lady, she'll make sure that we get it. Thank you very much.
Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and appreciate the department being with us, Commissioner. So I'll give you a little advanced warning that this question is a little bit long and it's a word problem, so you might want to take notes.
I'm an engineer, sir.
Yeah, oh, great, good.
Yeah, it's hard for me with words.
So mine's regarding the ARP funds that TDEC has received, and so when TDEC initially outlined how we were going to spend those, so we had 3 categories. We had the formula-based non-competitive grants at $1 billion. That has stayed pretty consistent, and then category 2 is state-initiated strategic projects, and initially we said $269 million on that. And then a third component of it, that was the competitive grants, and that the amount there was going to be determined based on the remaining funds from strategies 1 and 2. So since then, we've had there have been some press releases that have outlined different funding strategies, including $269 million for both state-initiated strategic projects and competitive grants. And then there was one that talked about $200 million for competitive grants. And then there was really no mention of the state-initiated strategic projects. So we've been consistent about the $1 billion portion. So tell me about the messaging surrounding the other $350 million. How will that be? Give us a definite answer now. How that will be spent, and then maybe why has that strategy changed on the $350 million?
If I may. Yes, sir. So a little bit of that is you're talking about the same funds. They were just called different things in press releases. So if I may recap what we have. So initially, we did have what we were terming phase 1, which was approximately $1 billion, which is the non-competitive formula grants. And those are fully obligated, and that obligation stands at about $997 million. And then phase 2 was the $269 million, and that was actually to be distributed across a number of projects, which included the $200 million and what we were calling phase 2 competitive grants, which is the grant program that we received over $485 million in applications for. It included $57 million in state-initiated projects. So that's $40 million within Tennessee State Parks for water infrastructure within parks, and $17 million to TDOT for some stormwater investments. It included $6.5 million in a septic grant program. We have done our discovery on that, and due to the time limitations associated with ARP, that does not seem to be a feasible thing to launch, and we have found other funding to be able to deal with that within other water funding. It included $2 million in some technology solutions, which is part of our kind of our overhead that as we're trying to, as you can imagine, trying to track all of this and create effective dashboards. And then we had originally identified an additional $3.5 million that was going to supplement the phase one because of the way the formula worked out, is the short answer. There were some small communities that we were identified as part of public comment. So that makes up that $269 million. That was the phase two. And then we had the third bucket was the administrative overhead. We estimated 6%. And so that was $81 million. And all of this was, estimations that were made in 2022, I believe. So since that time, to give you a current status of where we stand on that, in the phase three that we had talked about, we did not have any money allocated to phase three because we said, as we get further down, and we are now further down, we were going to see what was still available. If all these other things we had planned didn't pan out, then we could reinvest that in competitive grant applications. So phase three was the cleanup strategy to not leave anything on the table. So, so where we currently stand, phase one, the non-competitive grants, as I said, we have $997 million obligated. Phase two, we are at just shy of $258 million obligated or in the process of getting through the contracting phase. We have reduced our estimated administrative overhead from the 6%, which was $81 million. We've reduced that down to $46 million. So we have identified about $49 million that would be that kind of phase three eligible funding. And that is where we are looking at, can we roll that back in to further fund the competitive? As I mentioned, there was a number of communities that were not fully funded or were not funded at all as part of the competitive grant application. So currently we're about $49 million, and we continue to look at of all of the money that is obligated, but which the federal deadline to obligate is December of 2024 by the state. What of that do we need to think about is at risk not being fully completed and expended by the federal expenditure deadline of December 2026? So that was my very wordy answer to you, Leader Cochran. So is there anything I can do to clarify that answer?
Leader Cochran.
So just a couple, and you've covered, I think a lot of what I was asking there. You mentioned the December 2024 deadline to obligate, and
Yes,
then we have the December 2026 to expend it. Are we good there? Right, as far as do we feel comfortable about meeting those deadlines? And then does the department have a strategy for reallocating any funding that might not be able to be spent within the federal deadline? So for the most part, are we good? And then if there's a portion that we're worried about, do we have a strategy to address that portion?
So we are good on the obligation 2024 deadline. I feel very confident about that. On the 2026 expenditure deadline, we are mostly good. There are some concerns, and we do have a strategy to mitigate the risks to the state, because at the end of the day, our goal is to not send any money back to the feds. So in terms of what is that strategy, our first part that we are focusing right now is all of the communities that have existing grant contracts. So, well, first, if there's any money that's not obligated, let's immediately fund the competitive grants. The communities that are coming to us saying, please, we have needs. But then for the ones that are obligated, but as time has gone on, maybe circumstances have changed on the local level, over between now and this summer, we have a variety of stats that we can pull. All of this is managed through an IT system, a grants management system. So we have a variety of stats that we can pull to say, are any of these projects at risk to not be successfully completed? And right now, a marker of our success is how are they progressing through what's called the procurement process. So we have a variety of tiers, kind of red flags built into our system, and we are currently working through any of our grantees that have some sort of red flag associated with them. They're not progressing through the steps. And so we're starting with not only are we using our grant administration staff, we're using our contractor, and we've also using additional resources within TDEC. We have an Office of External Affairs, and we're making direct contact with all of these communities that, for whatever reason, are not making the progress we'd like to see to feel comfortable. In looking at that, I believe the state as a whole, by middle of this calendar year is when the state would want to, if there is any opportunities for reobligation, the state is looking at it from the middle of this calendar year to meet the December 2024 deadline for the state.
Chairman Cochran.
Thank you, Chair Laney. And so I imagine one of those red flags might be, if an entity that has obligated funds maybe has not initiated a contract to expend the funding.
Yes.
Do we know how many of those entities exist, and then how much funding does that encompass of those who have not initiated a contract to expend it?
So my data that I have pulled in front of me is from February 23rd. So this is, as you can imagine, this is changing on a daily basis, especially as we continue to make contact. But as of February 23rd, we had 47 out of 337 grantees that had not submitted a procurement for approval, meaning they had not sent a contract to us to say, yes, this is who we want to hire to expend the money. Of those 47, about half of those had not even started a draft in our system, and that is about $50 million. And then the other half had started a draft but had not hit submit. So like I said, we're watching all this through an IT system, and that was about $100 million. Of that $100 million, one of those communities was Metro Nashville-Davidson County. So of the $100 million, $63 million of that was for Metro Nashville, but I got confirmation today that Metro Nashville has submitted their procurement application, so that in one day it has improved our stats significantly by one of our big grantees participating. So of the concern, I'm less concerned about the 100 million to the grantees that have started a draft. And our first line of outreach was to the grantees that have not even started a draft. So that was, like I said, we have tiers of people we're tracking down.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
While we have had a number of ongoing conversations with your department along these lines, and I do want to say I've had some input from some of the organizations that were expressing issues, and things have improved. I'm glad to hear that. I do think there is maybe one more area of real concern, and that is the administrative contracts that the development districts have with local governments. They've had those contracts for 50 years, and now there seems to be some problem with the language. So it's a technical issue. I'm sure the word "and" is somehow at issue. So if you could just help expedite the resolution of that issue, again, as we have spoken so many times, just getting these approvals, because it's not just because we have until the end of the year to obligate these funds doesn't mean that we couldn't get it done sooner and start doing the procurement. I remain concerned about our ability to expend the funds in a timely manner. So I know that that's top line. I do want to say thank you for the improvement but to bring to your attention that there's another issue out there. Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to shorten this question and hopefully we can get to the next one quickly. The governor has proposed $10 million in non-recurring dollars for water projects across the state. And we just want to make sure these aren't going to be funded or associated with any of the ARPA funding. That's my first question. Then my second question would be, when do y'all plan on rolling these out to the communities? How will the communities be served for this funding? And is there a competitive bid process for that $10 million that's budgeted for this year? So I don't know who that would be, but boom, you're off.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So yes, so the $10 million, we originally had intended it to hopefully continue to fund the communities that have already raised their hands in the competitive ARP process. We are hoping that we will be able to address the majority of the needs through these other residual funds. $10 million is not a lot, quite honestly, for a water regionalization project. That's basically one project, if even that. So initially we were intending to supplement. One of the things we're running into, as with all construction projects, is cost escalations or unexpected things that are between the budget and the reality. So we had intended it to be part of a supplementing on the other regionalization projects we've already funded. And so that was our intention, was to continue to fund the pool that we have.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Lady Commissioner, friends from TDEC. It's great to see y'all today. Just have a quick question on some vacancies. At the end of February, Edison indicated that y'all had about 318 full-time positions that were vacant, and 61 of those have been vacant for over 12 months. And so really just two questions. One of them is, how many of those are seasonal vacancies? And then the other one is, if you guys are requesting an additional 23 positions, normally that's kind of a red flag to us if you haven't filled the positions that you have and you're asking for additional positions. Speak to that. Thank you.
I certainly can. And I can't remember that. Can you restate the date and the number that you did there on the
February the 27th, 318 full-time positions statewide.
Okay. So last year we came in and we looked at that, got a similar question, great question. We had over 500 vacancies. And of those, we've gone from 200 of those vacancies being what we would categorize as long-term to 50. We're at 56, I think is the exact number where we stand today. So with respect to long-term vacancies, and most of those 56 are really, they fall into a category of highly technical, highly skilled kind of engineers or technical positions, air modelers, things like that. They're really, really hard to fill. So that's 41 of them there. The other are 15 on the Bureau of Conservation side, which we're holding those for a minute until we can reclassify and relocate some of those positions. So we've really made some great strides going from 200 down to 50, over 200 down to 56. And when you look at us overall as a pretty large department with somewhere around 2,700 people, if you look at normal business from Bureau and labor statistics, you typically have 5 to 7% for most businesses with respect to vacancies. When you start to fold in hospitality, which with our state parks, we're hospitality, that turns out to be about 6 to 10%. So really, we feel like we're at a stage where those vacancies, they're just fluctuating due to attrition, turning them over, reclassifying, and then the seasonal aspects of some of the state park positions. Did that get close enough?
Madam Chair, Lady, that works for me. I'll pass it on to the next one. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Hicks of Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair, Lady, and Commissioner. Good to see you and your team here. Thank you all for being with us. What I want to talk about is the Heritage Conservation Trust Fund. Last year, about $30 million was added to this fund. And then, if I'm correct, this year request has been, I guess, granted in the governor's budget for about 1.5 million. And that's non-recurring. So my question is, was the 30 million from last year, was that spent?
Be glad to take that. Thank you, Chairman Hicks. I'll tell you where we are with last year's 30 million. There have been already identified and committed to 12 specific projects with a total value of about 14 million. And from that fund, only 5.5 million has been spent from last year. So that's the answer in terms of last year's budget where we are. We opened that process up after that budgeting was established, and that board that oversees the decisions on those investments for land across the state of Tennessee, conservation lands, some of which doesn't come to the state, some of which stays in not-for-profit organizations and local community organizations. Generally, that board has required that money to be used in a very leveraged way. And so far from that 30 million last year, they're continuing that approach. 5.5 million out of the fund for $14 million worth of property in 12 different projects. So that's where that is from last year, and pretty happy with the way that board is operating that fund and really trying to leverage.
Okay, I guess I lost you just a little bit. I'm sorry. So $30 million last year.
Right.
So I guess I'm confused on, so if the total 30 million from last year wasn't spent, then why was an additional 71.5 million asked for this year? I guess if you can help me understand that.
Yeah. So the purpose of that fund is, as you understand, I'm sure, is conservation lands around the state of Tennessee. As we talked earlier, I mean, the ability for folks in Tennessee to have essentially, I'm going to talk a little bit of outdoor recreation theory here. People need a backyard. And as they say about land, they're not making any more of it. But one thing I can figure out, they're making more Tennesseans, about 80,000 a year right now. So the suggestion of an investment of 71 million more into that Heritage Conservation Trust Fund is to put it in with a group of people who have shown a real conservative fiscal capacity to leverage that money to the best interest of Tennesseans. We've identified with this administration several good land projects that are already identified. And as you might imagine, in the land deal arena, it doesn't do us any good to share where those are right now out in public. I'm glad to come and share those with anybody in your office, if you will. But there have been identified projects that will absorb that 71.5 million.
Okay.
So I will say,
including a couple of new state parks that have been identified.
and if I may, sir, the Heritage Conservation Trust Fund it is those funds. We work with the Department of Ag whenever they're acquiring lands, and there's some things being considered there. Certainly TWRA as well. And I would say even a smaller portion of those conservation trust funds really come to the Department for Management of State Parks. So there are a number of entities and departments that are working on a number of projects out there that have been identified. Wish I could give you the exact list. But we're more than happy to come by and talk about the exact properties and projects if that's helpful.
Well, if you want to kind of get that to us, you can go through the chair lady. That way she can give it out to everybody. That'd probably be a lot easier. So you kind of answered my last question, Madam Chair, and I'll be finished, because I know some of the recipients of the trust fund has been the state, and the fact that I know TDEC owning land or the state owning land, and I know that they've been recipients and they've received awards again through the trust fund in previous years. And so I'm curious of how exactly that works, of the state owning land and then asking. Can you explain that to me? And
I'll be glad to get into that with you, Chairman Hicks. So. The Heritage Conservation Trust Fund Board has the flexibility to apply its funds to lands that would be coming to an organization like the Nature Conservancy, who may pull together some lands and hold them either for a long, long time, or hold them until the state is ready to take them on and begin the operation of those and open those up for public use. Right. So that's a model that gets used fairly regularly within that organization. Same thing has happened with some local organization, a great project down in Chattanooga on South Chickamauga Creek Blueway Trail down there. They needed an access point, and the Heritage Conservation Trust Fund, one of those 12 projects that they've already approved from last year's budgeting, was to buy an old parking lot, if you will, to turn that into an access point to help the community activate that outdoor recreation.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner.
I have a follow-up question in that same space. Last year was $30 million. This year's budgeted amount is 71.5. In previous years, how much has that been?
So the Heritage Conservation Trust Fund went for many, many years without being refunded and went stagnant, if you will, Chairman. And then last year got reinvigorated and brought back to sort of active engagement. And the original funding for that was back in a couple of different administrations ago, previous administrations. And so now taking this 30 million, 71.5 at this point in time to put in a little over $100 million to be leveraged into conservation lands and outdoor recreation lands is the right scale in our opinion. Thanks.
And you, I think we mentioned, I think most members know, but just in case, there is an 11-member board. Those board members are appointed all by the governor. And this is we're talking about $100 million. So what sort of reporting process is there from that board, or how transparent is this whole thing for this finance committee or for the average Tennessee citizen?
Yeah, so those meetings are publicly announced, and those are subject to the sunshine rules and open. They're generally a couple of handfuls of people at those meetings, mostly folks who are involved in the land conservation arena. But it's other than the point in time when they're, the deals are getting put together for the land, the actual deliberation by that board is open.
Right. Thank you. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So look, we all love y'all. We love the parks. We love what y'all do. But I get a little more excited about this than I probably should. But during the governor's State of the State address, it was announced that $63 million was included in the proposed budget to create 4 new state parks, with the goal of funding a total of 8 new state parks by the end of the governor's term. Last year's budget also included funding to establish 4 new state parks as well as 22 positions. So I know that y'all have been so very kind to invite all of us to your parks. My family has definitely taken advantage of that. We have loved traveling this state and going to so many of our amazing state parks. I've seen the investment this committee has put out there of the people's money in better facilities, in better trails, in better everything, just more accessible trails. It's really made a difference. But here's my questions. Provide an update on the parks added last year. When are these expected to be fully open and operational? So look, we all want to visit them. We've invested the money. When we're going to get to?
We'll give you special access, sir.
Well, look, I know, but
tomorrow.
when are we all going to get in there? So.
That's right. I'll be glad to take that. So, Leader, thanks for that question. We've got some really exciting work going on each of those 4 parks from last year. Middle Fork Bottoms, North Chickamauga Creek, Scotts Gulf have all had park managers hired. We're beginning to hire that staff. We've got out of the 32 or 3 positions, about 14 have already been hired. So that process is well underway, along with, from my old days at Bridgestone, if you don't mind, sir, a Gantt chart of the issues that need to be covered and exactly what needs to be done to make those places ready to operate smoothly as state parks. Now, a big step that we've just recently taken is as we've gone through that Gantt process for each of those, and I'll come to a very specific answer to your question too. As we go through that Gantt chart of what needs to be done for each park, we've established that standard, which will make the whole park family proud when we go from a good place to go hike, Virgin Falls for one. It's a great hike. It's open right now. Middle Fork Bottoms out north of Jackson. It's a wonderful place to go train your retriever dog. It's a great place to go hike. They've got 5K runs starting. It's open now, but it's not at that state park level. And so we're wanting to make sure we're establishing, if we're calling something a state park, everybody in Tennessee is proud of it to be a state park. And so our game plan right now, Leader, is 3 of those parks will be opening this year.
Wow.
Exactly. Devil's Backbone, probably more like 26. We're working with the National Park Service. It's a little bit of a kind of starting from scratch out there, where those other 3 parks have a little bit more backbone already established.
Well, and tell us a little bit if you, and I know we're late in the day, and members, thanks for hanging with us, because I'm telling you, if you hadn't been to a state park recently, go. All right. They're fantastic. What the truncated version, just a minute or two, what does it take to take a natural area and turn it into a state park? Like what are we talking about as far as that process? And then what are the additional costs beyond just, I mean, many of these areas, the state already owns the land.
Right.
But what's really entailed in that?
So what's entailed in that is the staffing so that my mother-in-law feels safe when she goes there to take a hike. So the level of staffing, both for security and safety, as well as for interpretive, helping people understand what's there. There are amenities. We want folks to be able to go have a clean restroom. We want folks to know where they can go if they have questions to find a ranger station, or maybe a visitor center. So it's the staffing, it's the amenities, including some of the infrastructure type amenities. If we're going to be elevating these to the kind of promotion, thank you, Morgan, if we're going to be elevating these to the kind of promotion that our marketing team and Commissioner Ezel's marketing team pushes, we need to be ready for more people. And we want those communities to be glad we're there, so that we're ready for those more people.
Well, and I know
Is that
part of that obviously is staff. I mean, when we were at
Yeah.
Pickett State Park recently, we went over to Alvin C. York and Pew as well.
Right.
And when we were at Pew, they actually had a young man who was quite a distance down in the lower gorge there and broke his leg apparently, and had to be hauled out. I mean, it took the better part of a half a day for the entire team there to be able to do that. And I know that's part of it as well. So the proposed budget, this budget we're talking about now, includes $59 million non-recurring capital projects for 3 of these. It's actually 4 parks, but 3 specifically. Cardwell Mountain is $22 million. Head of the Crow is $25 million. Hiwassee Scenic River is $12 million. It was kind of interesting, though. The proposed state park at Fort Southwest Point has no proposed capital outlay at this juncture. Why is that?
So, Leader Lambert, that park is already active as a park. It's a city park right now. The city of Kingston operates it. And the game plan is for us to take on the historic part of that park and do the interpretation and take on those facilities. We've had boots on the ground up there. Director Robertson, who runs our operations, and I have been up there and looked around. It looks at a high level right now. It's state park worthy, quite frankly. Kudos to the city of Kingston. They're running a great program up there. But that historic site needs the overlay of the state park protection, as well as the invitation to bring more people off I-40 down there into Kingston to go enjoy it and visit it. So
Well,
the
similarly
structure's
on
already
that,
there.
and that's
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you. That's really good to know that that's already in good spot. I think it's on the budget overview page 8. There's $2.4 million in recurring funds for the new state parks. There's only 3 listed in there as receiving a portion of that funding. Cardwell Mountain, for some reason, is not listed on that. Is there a reason why recurring funding would not be necessary there?
Yes, sir, Leader. We'll expect to staff that up later, not in this budget year. So Cardwell Mountain, because of the precarious nature and the value of those archaeological resources, we're not going to be inviting people in until we're ready for people to really come in. And so the recurring funding for those staff will actually be asked for either the following year or the year after. We've got a game plan out there right now for both the staffing up investments as well as the amenity investments.
Well, and last one, and Commissioner, obviously you got the right man for the job here. I mean, I know this is stuff that you absolutely love. So my last one is one I know you and I have had a lot of conversations about, but from 21 to 23, there's about $64 million that was appropriated for deferred maintenance and backlogs at state parks. How much of that has been spent? And how much of that remains? And then kind of the final caveat to that is how do we make sure that that backlog doesn't occur again? Because I certainly have seen that when you go to the parks. I mean, you can see almost like in every 20-year infusion of money. You can see it on plaques. You can see it on when stuff was built. When you talk to the park managers, they'll say, yeah, that was 70, that was 90, that was, So, but how do we have a sustainable long-term plan so that backlog doesn't, so first two questions, and then kind of that third, just a short truncated, how do we make sure that backlog doesn't occur?
Sure. Leader, we've got about $16 million left out of that budgeting. If I may, about 600 of those 4,700 projects still to do. We expect to finish all that up in 26. So that's in reference to investing in that deferred maintenance. And let me tell you, I shared earlier, that has had a lot to do with the morale of our park team, knowing that we're being asked to take care of what we already have is huge. And thank you for that. Going forward, two things really. One, we're shifting into and developing a preventative maintenance program. That's manufacturing to me. That's old hat, right? Preventative maintenance. So you're really focusing on doing that. Two, the legislation that was passed in 22 to require and allow us to set money aside and hold that sacrosanct, literally to take care of those big hospitality investments. I mean, at some point out there, we know the HVAC system's going out. It shouldn't be a surprise, and we certainly should have the money in hand to do it. And so we've already, in the short 2 years we've had that authority, set back about $10 million in that. And so when we look at our overall revenue growth, which is going to top 70 million this year, it was 42 million in fiscal year 19. I mean, we're getting to be better business folks. And as we look at that, we can lay some of that money aside and have that ready to manage those things.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you for all you do. I know TDEC does a lot more than just parks, but it's a huge part of it. I mean, these parks, if we don't preserve them, I mean, there's no going back and getting them later. And so thanks for the job y'all do. I used to be able to say I've been to like half the state parks, but you keep adding parks, which is a good thing. So I think I'm maybe right at half now. Thank you.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner and team. Good afternoon. In Leader Lamberth's zeal for his state parks, he zipped through all the rest of the questions and did ask my question. So,
okay.
But because of that zeal, I'd like to point our members to a virtuous circle. And because of his zeal for state parks, Leader Lamberth and his family are featured on page 12 and 13, and it's titled The Lamberth Family Adventures. And so I would like to point that out. Thank you for featuring our illustrious leader, and his passion has come through in a great way. And so I'd just like to point the members to this, and thank you, team.
We
Thank you,
photoshopped his image as best we could to
thank
make
you.
it presentable.
Thank you, Commissioner. Fortunately, he has a beautiful family. Thank you.
He does, absolutely.
Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make this quick as well. Before I get started, though, I do want to acknowledge Greg Young sitting back there doing his best Airman O'Malley impersonation. He's looking great. So I want to talk about swimming pools. So after the pandemic, we've determined, I guess, that due to rising costs, upkeep, declining visitor activity, the various park pools throughout the state would be closed, and we do some conversion or something along those lines. So in fiscal year 23, there's $3 million non-recurring included in TDEC's capital budget for these state park pool conversions. And some of those new amenities include, playgrounds, splash pads, event buildings, that sort of thing. So first of all, have any of these conversion projects been completed to date? And if not, what are the estimated completion dates?
I'm starting to feel bad. I'm going to skew some of the questions so I can answer them. I keep deferring to my deputy commissioners, and they're doing such a great job. We got a heck of a team, and I'm going to rely on DC Greer to answer that one for us.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, Representative Barrett. So unfortunately, we have not completed any of those conversion projects. So the answer is 0 to your first initial question.
That's the wrong answer. No, I'm just teasing.
It is. It's the truthful answer, so it's right. I understand that what you're saying. I've been focusing on this since I walked in the door to try to giddy up and go on those issues and those projects. One of 2 points of challenge. One is the challenge of trying to leverage on getting some federal money in to help offset some of those costs, and doing that through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So we got a little bit out of cycle, and we're still focused on doing that. We believe we're going to be successful in doing that, and that'll help leverage some of the state's money and making those projects go forward. So we have in plans right now for the demolition projects to take place. We've got demolition projects going forward up at Tim's Ford and at Paris Landing already. And we've got demolition projects being contracted for at several of the other parks. So we're pushing those about as fast as we can push them. I think we're going to have some of those demolitions done this year, replacements projects over the following year and a half or two.
All right. So how much of the 3 million appropriation has been spent? I'm taking from that answer that the next answer is zero, but I want to give you an opportunity to fill in if any of that money's been spent up to this point.
I might have to throw in ask a friend on that to Scott in terms of that particular appropriation.
Hi, I'm Scott Grammer. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the department. I will get the specifics on that, and we'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
I don't have that in front of me.
Well, as you're digging into that to get the specifics to answer that, if any of the 3 million's been spent, explain what's been spent, when it's been spent on. Also, have there any other dollars been spent toward this purpose for the pool conversions? And then what would be the source of that funding? So if you can get back to us on that, that'd be great. And then one final question, which parks in Tennessee still have pools, and what are the operating costs of those pools?
So I can feel pretty comfortable running through the list of where we have those, and be glad to get back with you with operating cost details, of course. So, okay, Chairman. T.O. Fuller in Memphis, Standing Stone, Henry Horton, Cumberland Mountain State Park. If I might call a friend and look back, and Fall Creek Falls. Thank you.
Representative Barrett.
Well, if I can make one suggestion for Montgomery Bell State Park, and I've had this conversation with our friend Blair. Tennis, I know, kind of went away there for a while in popularity, but now pickleball is coming back. And we've got some tennis courts out there that I think you need a 4-wheel drive to get across. So, maybe put that on the list as an amenity that could replace the swimming pool, is to maybe get some pickleball courts, tennis courts back out there in the state parks. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and your team. We appreciate the state parks and all of the infrastructure projects that you all are oversee. Obviously, those are all critically important to Tennesseans. We know that we have an aging water system. There's an article in my home paper today about the millions of tons of water that are being lost in this country because of leakages and that sort of thing. So, and you guys are on the front lines to try and help us correct that problem, and we do appreciate it. I don't have any further questioners on my list. So without objection, I want to thank members for their attention today. And as a reward, you get to be back here at 8 o'clock in the morning for our next budget hearings. And we will see you then. Without objection, we adjourn.
Thank you. Goodness.